Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to dive deep into a topic that's really the heart and soul of India, our agriculture. We're going to go beyond the headlines, look at the real numbers, and understand the full story behind our fields. So let's get right into it.
We've all heard this phrase, right? India is a nation of farmers. But what does that actually mean today? What's the reality for the millions of people who work the land? Let's peel back the layers and see what the data tells us.
So before we get into the specifics of India, let's just take one quick step back and make sure we're all on the same page. What do we even mean when we say the word agriculture?
On the surface, it seems pretty simple, but this definition is really interesting because it's not just about one thing. It's a science, understanding the soil, the climate, the biology, but it's also an art, a skill and an intuition that's been passed down through generations.
And honestly, this was the absolute game changer for humanity. The moment we figured out farming, we could stop wandering and settle down. We could build villages, then towns, then cities. It created the food surplus that allowed for everything else: art, culture, government. It's literally the foundation of civilization as we know it.
Okay, so from that huge historical perspective, let's zoom right into modern-day India. Because when we talk about agriculture here, the scale is just immense.
Just take a moment and really look at this number. 49%. Let that sink in. Nearly 1 out of every 2 people in this country depends on agriculture for their living. This single statistic is so powerful. It shapes our economy, our politics, our society. And for any students watching, this is an absolutely critical point to remember for your exams.
And hey, just a quick note so you know where we're getting our info. All the facts and figures we're looking at today come directly from official government reports and census data. So you can be sure this is all solid, reliable information. At its core, agriculture really rests on 2 main pillars: land and water. Now that term net sown area is just a technical way of saying the actual amount of land where crops are being planted. And as you can see, that's almost half of India's entire land mass. But what's even more mind-blowing is the water. A staggering 80% of India's fresh water goes into irrigation for our farms. All right, so we know a massive part of our population works in agriculture, but the next big question is, how much does all that work actually contribute to the national economy? The answer might not be what you expect. So here's the number. In 2019-20, agriculture's share of our economy, what experts call the gross value added, or GVA, was 16.5%. Now just hold that number in your head for a second, because when we put it next to the population number we just saw, well, that's when the real story starts to take shape. And here we go. This is probably the most important thing to understand about Indian agriculture today. Look at this gap. Almost half of our workforce is generating less than 1/5 of our country's economic output. This imbalance is at the very heart of so many of the challenges we're about to talk about. The big question is, why does this gap exist?
This chart here gives you the complete picture of our economy. You can see that the services sector is the real giant, making up more than half of everything. Then comes industry, and then you see agriculture. It's the smallest piece of the economic pie, even though it's by far the biggest employer.
So, to understand that economic puzzle, we really need to get down to the ground level and look at the key features of Indian farming, or KT. What actually defines the way we farm in India?
Well, there are 3 things that really stand out. First, a huge amount of our farming is subsistence farming. That basically means farmers are growing food mainly to feed their own families, not necessarily to sell in a big market for profit. Second, it's a massive gamble on the monsoon. About 60% of our farming still depends entirely on rainfall. And third, it's incredibly diverse. From apples in the north to spices in the south, we grow almost everything.
So even though its share of the national economy is kind of small, this quote is the absolute truth. If you go into rural India, farming isn't just a part of the economy, it is the economy. It's the engine that runs everything and the social glue that holds communities together. And there are a couple more defining traits we have to mention. First is that we mostly grow food crops. About 2/3 of our farmland is dedicated to food grains, which is obviously critical for our food security. And second, and this cannot be stressed enough, is the huge, often invisible role of women. They are involved in every single step of the farming process.
Okay, so we've built this picture of a sector that's absolutely vital, supports millions of people, but is also dealing with some major, deep-rooted problems. So let's talk about what those core challenges really are.
This really is the question that's at the center of the entire conversation about agriculture in India. Why do the people who grow our food
so often struggle to earn a decent income. The next slide gives us a huge part of the answer. The data here is just shocking. Look at this. The vast majority of farms in India are incredibly small. Almost half of them are less than half a hectare. These tiny plots of land make it almost impossible to be efficient or profitable. You can't use modern machinery, and you just can't grow enough to make a real living.
And you see, this one big problem of small farms creates a kind of domino effect. Because the land is small, farmers can't use machines. That's made even worse by poor infrastructure. Things we take for granted like reliable electricity, proper storage for crops, and access to loans. It's a tough cycle that traps a lot of farmers.
And so we're left with this massive, monumental question. How does a country like India support the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of its farmers, while at the same time ensuring there's enough affordable food for over 1 billion people? There are no easy answers here. But as we've seen today, the first, most essential step is to truly understand the data and the